y'all, it's me, CheesyPaninie, and today we're gonna take a look at an old pixel art commission I worked on back in July 26, 2021 to August 13, 2021. This project was kind of like a trilogy because it is one artwork that was modified to create 3 different versions of it. Landscapes were my favorite subject to draw and paint when I was younger. However, I never actually done one in pixel art, so I didn't know how long it would take me to make, how hard it would be, and how much it would be priced. So I took the commission and priced it really low because I viewed it as more of practice and a nice addition to my pixel art portfolio. My client Mefic gave me this picture as a reference for what they wanted, a shore facing the ocean with some clouds above. They wanted a daytime version that would say, "Stream starting soon," a sunset version that would say, "Be right back," and a nighttime version that would say, "The stream is now over." It's a simple enough prompt and they gave me free reign over other details like colors and compositions. But just because they are giving me so much freedom doesn't mean I just do things willy-nilly. I sent them frequent updates so that they can see my progress and tell me if there's something that they wanted me to change. This method actually helped with many of my commissions because it prevents me from having to redo a large amount of work if I made a mistake or if the client wanted something to be changed or added. I would usually start my art commissions with a pencil sketch, but the way I've always done landscapes when I was younger was to just start putting colors on the canvas. So for the first day, I decided to just go ahead and immediately start doing it digitally with pixels. I first put together a few colors that I thought would look nice and even tried incorporating the colors of Mefic's avatar to it, but I decided to go for a warmer color scheme for the day version. I spent about less than an hour working on the initial sketch, and once I got the rough idea down, I sent it to my client and waited for their response. Once I got the go signal, I went back to drawing and started adding some rocky details by the shore with a hint of sand texture, which I made with the airbrush tool and some manual dithering. And just to define what the word dithering is, it's this technique where pixel artists make patterns, which is usually checkerboard, to make an illusion of the gradient effect. On this day, I only got to spend about a little over half an hour on it because I had an influx of commissions after the trolling incident, which you can learn about in this video, which I'll link in the description below. So I had quite a bit piled up and was working on multiple art pieces at a time. It might sound kind of overwhelming to others, but the way I work, I actually do better when I switch gears every once in a while. I get more burnt out when I focus on one thing for a really long time than when I work on something for a bit, then do another activity later in the day. It gives my brain a little bit of a break and helps me get a fresher perspective on the art piece once I've returned to it after some time had passed. I spent the next drawing session for this piece just defining the details of the beach. I put lines on the ridges of the rocky areas to show that these are solid and added several tones of orange in sandier areas to soften it up. I also mixed the orange colors of the beach with the blue color of the water to produce a somewhat grayish or murky brown to make certain areas of the beach look submerged. The farther away they are, the lighter and more desaturated their colors were. Not gonna lie, I was starting to get a really good feeling about the piece, especially after I started drawing the beach face. To those that don't know, beach face is what you call that part of the shore that's wet from the water from the waves of the sea. I didn't actually know about this until I started writing the script. I literally had to Google part of the beach that's wet term. I did a little bit of anti-aliasing, which is just a fancy term for putting pixels at the edges of a line to make them appear softer, especially from far away. I didn't really have any fancy techniques for making those sea foams and just drew them in random shapes, taking care to just put some spaces here and there. I wanted it as random and as natural as possible. For the clouds, I wasn't really sure how to go about it yet and just tried doing random lines for shading, but it ended up looking a little too rough for what I was going for. I also started experimenting with adding beach grass. I wasn't quite sure what to do about them at this point, so I just settled with deciding the random placements. I didn't want too much, just bits and pieces here and there. So for the next session, I changed my approach. I put some dithering in the usual structured checkerboard pattern and added another shade to the cloud to soften its look. I wanted the clouds to not be perfectly round but still fluffy, so I drew them in this kind of bent curve as if it was spreading to one side. I gave the clouds a yellowish shade by the middle where I was going to put the sun to show how dramatically its light affected them. As for the sun itself, I really like drawing it with rays of light, so that's what I did here. The lightest part is white and highlights one side of the sun. The furthest part of the cloud from the sun, on the other hand, is a lot darker but with less contrast. I wanted the dark shades to blend softly into each other and not feel too pronounced. I also added a bit of highlight at the back, which are not as light as the ones at the center. As for the grass, I changed the colors to a shade of green that was a little yellowish and desaturated so that it would blend better with the rest of the drawing. For the next session, I added even more detail to the clouds, and by now I think you guys probably realized that this is my favorite part of the drawing to work on. It was both tedious but enjoyable for me, and I honestly went a little too crazy with it even though I was only supposed to do something simple. I really liked how soft the clouds look while still having shadows that add a lot of depth to them. And there's just something so satisfying about doing dithering for those edges. I didn't make it too perfect of a pattern because there's something very organic about the randomness of scattered pixels. The next day, I continued with the clouds, then started putting some more depth to the rocky beach. Compared to the clouds, they were standing out way too much, so I needed to tone it down with a shade in between orange and the dark, but desaturated red, which was brown. I also began adding a lighter tone to those rocks to emphasize their solid shape. For the grass, I also added two shades that would represent the shadows that they cast, making sure that it was somewhere in the middle of the color of the sand and the color of the grass. Since I already had the look for the beach down, finishing off the right side the next day went by quickly. I added my signature to the lower corner and I was done with the daytime beach. Now it was time to do the nighttime and sunset versions. I didn't really want to change anything about the water since it's easy to go overboard with changes to it if I'm not careful, and also because it was very tiring to do. So instead, I opted to just modifying the sky a little and adding a moon instead of a sun. I placed two copies of the sky side by side, flipped one of them, and shifted it around until I was happy with the cloud positions. Then I drew a crescent moon at the center to make it visually different from the sun on the daytime version. If I made a full moon, it would have still been fine, but I just liked the elegance of a crescent moon. I played around with the colors, shifting them around until I found a nice combination that worked. Since I was very particular about the color I wanted for the sky, I made sure that I was happy with it before I started changing the colors of the water and the beach. It took me a while, mostly because I wanted different shades of blue that wouldn't clash with each other too much. I ended up with this combination where the sky was a shade of ultraviolet, the sea is a shade of midnight blue, the beach was a slightly warm shade of gray, and the grass was leaning towards teal. Once I was happy with the colors, I started fixing up the sky, starting with the clouds. I needed to make sure that the left connected perfectly with the right. I also wanted the clouds to slightly overlap with the moon. I added a bit of texture to the moon and highlighted a portion of the cloud. But as I was doing so, I realized that the moon didn't even look much like a moon from afar. So I modified it with a bit more emphasis on the outer curve and removed a piece of cloud that was blocking it. It still kind of blends a bit with the clouds, but it's a lot more identifiable than before. After that, I filled in the empty parts of the sky at the left side, made a few little adjustments, and I'm done. The next thing I needed to work on was the sunset version. I wanted purple, pink, orange, and yellow to be present on this one. I actually pulled out a reference for the colors and adjusted them to my preference. Eventually, I ended up with a pinkish sky, a pink to purple ocean, a light pink peach beach, and golden yellow grass. There's not much orange in there, but the peach did give some warmth to the artwork. When I was satisfied with the colors, I started flipping and shifting the sky like I did before to give it a different look. For this one, I wanted the sun to be partially covered by the ocean as it sets. I didn't want long, bright rays for this one. Instead, I wanted a soft glow surrounding it. But I didn't want it to look too plain or too bright, so I put a dithering texture over the sun. After that, I carried on, filling in the empty spaces until I ended up with this. Now that all 3 images were finished, it was time for me to add in the captions in the middle. My client didn't really give me a specific font to use, nor did they have an idea of what they wanted, so they let me choose whichever I felt worked best. I decided to do 3 versions and let them choose among those 3. Before I show you the 3 versions, let me explain how fonts work in Aseprite. You don't type them in the way you do in other art softwares. You basically type them up in a window using any font, and the program turns them into a pixelized version. Version 1 was a sleek font with quite a bit of color. Unfortunately, I forgot what font I used that time. Version 2 was fun, solid, and uneven, but I only used 3 colors. Olive Sans Pimiento was the font for this one. Version 3 was bold and rounded with the most color out of the 3. Pattern was the font for this one. I showed the 3 to my client and they decided to go with the last one, which was also my personal favorite. And so I did the same with the other 2 screens, and here is the final look. This had to be one of my favorite pieces, and I think I really need to do more landscapes because after this piece, I never really made another one. I have made portraits with backgrounds on them afterwards, but not full-blown landscapes like this. It actually took me a long time before I got around to turning this footage into a video, and I actually have a lot more after this. I also have some newer work, so I might switch it around and post them alternatingly. I hope this was an interesting video, and if you want me to make more of this type of content, please help me grow this channel by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. It helps a lot more than you know. When the site sees that there are people who are actively engaging in it, they're going to start showing this off to more people. Thanks again for watching, and for now, I'm just gonna go do my thing, and you guys do your thing, and I'll see you guys later. Take it easy and stay cheesy.